Happy Halloween, Nos Calan Gaeaf Happis. Hello and welcome to this special Halloween edition of the Ghosts and Folklore podcast. I'm Mark Rees, and on each episode I investigate a different, weird and wonderful subject. And on this episode we are going to look at some of Wales's most haunted places. We are going to talk to real-life ghost hunters to find out how they go looking for ghosts on the spookiest night of the year. My good friend, Mr. Owen Staten, Wales's greatest storyteller, will be joining me, will be back on this show to talk to me about my new book, Paranormal Wales, and best of all, as regular listeners will know, I love a cheesy sound effect, and I have tucked away the greatest sound effect ever somewhere in this episode. So listen closely right until the end for the best sound effect you will hear this Halloween. Now, that is a heck of a lot to squeeze in to one episode, which is why this episode is going to be the longest one ever. This episode is going to be epic, so I hope you've stocked up on Halloween tricks and treats to eat along the way and a big mug of coffee, because you are going to need them. I'm going to need them. Let's see if we can get through this together. Now, before we dive in, I'd just like to explain quickly where the idea for this episode came from. Because once a year, I host a live event called Ghosts of Wales Live. Very imaginative, I know, but Ghosts of Wales Live. And in 2020, sadly, for the first time in quite a few years, I am not able to host one of those events. So what I've decided to do is to combine it with my podcast. This episode is, in effect, the Ghosts of Wales live event, but put onto podcast form. Now, that is a good thing in a way, because this means it is going to be the most popular Ghosts of Wales live event ever. When I usually do this, it means squashing a few hundred people into a dark room somewhere tucked away in deepest Wales. But because this is a podcast, it means for the first time ever, all of my friends out there in America, in Canada, on the moon, wherever you are listening, you can all join in. So I think while it's very sad that I can't see people in person this year, I think it's wonderful so many others can join in. Now, what usually happens at these events is we have ghost stories, we have special guests, we have some ghost hunting, and the highlight of each one is spooky belly dancing. Yes, spooky belly dancing, not from me, you'll be glad to know. Nobody wants to see me belly dancing. But we get the Lotus Sisters, the amazing Swansea-based Lotus Sisters, to do the belly dancing for us. Now, what I've tried to do with this episode is to get all of those people who are usually involved to join in some way with this episode. Sadly, I could not think of a way to get belly dancing onto a podcast. If anyone does know how I can do that, please let me know and I will make it happen in the future. But the rest of it is all coming up on this podcast. So we are going to have ghost stories. We are going to have talks about my new book. We are going to talk about some of Wales's most haunted places and my special guests, including those professional ghost hunters I mentioned earlier who would normally conduct the paranormal investigations at the live events will be popping up. So that's enough waffle and build-up. Let us start with a very quick and very eerie traditional Welsh Halloween ghost story. Now, this little piece of folklore pops up in various sources from the late Victorian times into the Edwardian times, and I am going to tell you the most common version of this story. Now, this story concerns a girl, a servant girl, working in a house in Wales, a well-to-do house, and she is determined on Halloween to work out who her future husband is going to be. Now, if you've listened to previous Halloween episodes, I've spoken a lot about how girls, and yes, it is stereotyping, but it was usually the girls who would go out and try and divine their future husbands, their future love life, by using all manner of strange ways, like throwing nuts on the fire, or throwing yarn out the window, or visiting crossroads at midnight. There are all these different ways that girls can work out who their future husband is going to be on Halloween. But there is one method I have not spoken of yet, and that is the method this girl decided to attempt. The shades of night had fallen on October the 31st. All Hallows Eve was upon us, or Nos Calan Gaeaf as it is known in Wales, the night before the first day of winter. Nos Calan Gaeaf had arrived in that dark spot which is said to be somewhere between Cardiganshire and Carmarthenshire. And it was under that cover of darkness that she sneaked out of that lovely big house she was working in and headed for the parish church, where it is said if you run around the parish church 9 times on October the 31st, you will obtain a sight of your future husband. Sounds quite easy enough, really. Walk around the church or run around the church 9 times and there you get a sight of your future husband. So she did this quickly so she could get back to the house before anyone had noticed she had gone. But as she did so, there in front of her was her master. She now knew she was in trouble. Instead of being at the house, being sensible, working hard, she was off gallivanting, running around churches on this silly mission, this foolish notion she had that she could work out the future and work out who her husband would be. Well, she had been busted. She immediately ran back home, and there she saw the lady of the house waiting for her. She said to her mistress, Why did the master have to come after me and frighten me? Why could I not be allowed to just do this one thing on October the 31st? But after listening to the girl's account, the mistress was, and I quote, greatly alarmed and was taken ill. In fact, she was so ill, she herself believed that she was, again, to quote, doomed to die. More than that, her husband would remarry and be happy without her, because she believed that that girl had in fact seen her future husband, because her husband had not left the house that night. She could not have seen her master because her master was at home. And after running around 9 times and coming face to face with this, what must have been an apparition, this ghost of her master, his wife realized that she would no longer be of this earth if her maid was instead destined to marry her husband. While she could have been overcome by jealousy, while on her deathbed, she was more concerned about the safety of her children. And she said to the maid, You are to become the mistress here. When I am gone, please look after my children. Be kind to my children. The maid agreed, and the mistress passed away. And that is what happens when Halloween divination does not go to plan. And on that cheerful note, let us move on to the next session of this Ghosts of Wales Live podcast. Now, whenever I do these events in person, I use it as a chance to talk about whatever my latest book might be. And this year I published a new book all about Wales's most haunted places called Paranormal Wales. Now, talk about terrible timing. This book was released the exact week that Wales, that the United Kingdom, was put into lockdown. So I was unable to have any kind of launch party, and I was hoping to launch it at Ghosts of Wales in October instead. Again, we know that sadly that has not happened either, so I am going to do it on this podcast. Now, rather than interview myself, because that would be a bit weird, even for me, although I have actually interviewed somebody called Mark Rees in the past, which looked a bit weird in the newspaper. Mark Rees talks to Mark Rees. But rather than do that on this podcast, I have invited my very good friend back onto the show, Mr. Owen Staten, Wales's greatest storyteller, to interview me on my podcast. I am effectively going to hand my podcast over to Owen, and by the magic of the internet, I think we can hand over to Owen right now. So fingers crossed. Owen, is there anybody there?
Hello, how are you?
Very good, very good. I'm about to hand over the reins to you now, Owen. This is now your show. This is now your Ghosts and Folklore podcast, I guess.
Wow. Well, it's like a dream come true, Mark. This is absolutely fab.
Look after it.
My own podcast. Well, if you give it to me, I'm not going to do it as well as you, but I am here to look after it for the time being. So, we're going to talk about your new book. Is that okay?
That's the whole point of the episode. So, yes, please do. Thank you, Owen.
Excellent. Okay, Mark. Well, welcome, everybody. We're here to celebrate Mark's new book, which is, of course, a landmark for him and a landmark for us. And this is, Mark, your fifth book, following on from the Little Book of Welsh Culture, the Little Book of Welsh Landmarks, Ghosts of Wales, the Tales from the Victorian Archives, and the A to Z of Curious Wales, and now Paranormal Wales.
It is, yes. I'm racking them up slowly, yes.
There you are. You're almost getting a bookshelf full. This is fantastic stuff. I mean, you'll have your own section in the library soon. I'm beginning to notice a bit of a pattern, Mark, and Wales, strange things. When did your interest in these strange and otherworldly begin? Was there something in particular that sparked this curiosity?
That's a good question. It's always been there. And I think if I was lying in a psychologist's chair right now, like Tony Soprano, and they went rummaging into my childhood, I think, you'd find things like, I can remember seeing Ghostbusters in the cinema in 1984. Do you remember that, Owen?
Absolutely, yeah. Do I just...
Yeah, no, something like that is quite, formative. I can remember reading Dracula for the first time. Do you remember Ghostwatch in the early 90s?
I do remember Ghostwatch, yes, indeed.
Yes, by another Welshman, actually, written by Stephen Volk. And I think all these things growing up were hugely important, hugely influential to me. And I think the big turning point was when I became a journalist. Journalists can do things that normal people can't do. And so, for example, if you want to go and visit a haunted house and spend the night there, most people, if you phone up and say, can I spend the night looking for ghosts in your castle, they'll say no. But if you do that as a journalist, you get a bit more leeway and they'll let you in. And so I think it's this combination with this childhood fascination with ghosts and spooky things, and then my career path in later life that gave me the opportunity then to actually go in and write about these things.
Excellent. So, as a child, you said Ghostbusters. Were you always fascinated in the Hammer horror movies, the Vincent Prices, those type of things? Did they really sort of pique your interest? And was that something that, growing up, you were really sort of into?
Definitely into. The interest with those actually came a little bit later. Hammer horror is my go-to Friday night watching now. I've got the box sets. And, I think the last one was The Reptile I was watching. But as a child growing up, they were already a little bit old by then. I was growing up in the 80s. And Hammer had, I think the last Hammer film was late 70s. And so by then, they were already a little bit old school. And it was only in my sort of teenage years that I discovered them then. And from then, Christopher Lee is a huge influence. The Wicker Man is possibly my favorite film. and Vincent Price is the king. So yes, but not so much as a young child.
I think as well, you're a similar age to me. I can fondly remember, and one of my most horrifying experiences as a child was there was a little video van that used to come around the village where I lived, okay? And it was a van that literally had about 25 VHS videos and Betamax in the back, and you could hire them. And a friend of mine who I was staying over with, he hired an American Werewolf in London, and effect that had on me as a young boy. I can remember that scene where he's running through the forest and you see him in bed and the werewolf face suddenly comes on, and it absolutely terrified me. But if all honesty, that made me so interested in that sort of thing. And I think in the early 80s, there were a lot of sort of horror, and there was a boom in that sort of film. I wonder, is that something you experienced as well?
Definitely in the early 80s. I mean, bizarrely, one of the things that really sticks in my mind as being quite terrifying back then was Michael Jackson's Thriller. Again, I'm sure you remember, at the time, there was so much fuss about it. And you're like, oh, come on, it's a music video. And I'm sure that's what the parents thought when they let their kids sit down and watch it. But then after that, Vincent Price Vincent Price is later. But when he transforms, that is just... It's at the time was just the most horrific thing I'd ever seen. And the 80s were a very, very good time for horror, weren't they?
Absolutely. So growing up, in this background with this interest in this type of thing, when you went into journalism, I can remember you as a sort of a showbiz reporter and that sort of thing. Were you always trying to push for these more curious, these more paranormal type of stories when you were working locally?
Yes. One of the... What you find with journalists, and this isn't always the case, but most journalists start as just a general news reporter, and then they specialize. And so, for example, a journalist with a love of football will naturally write more football stories until eventually they are a football writer. With me, my passion has always been for the arts, so for theatre, and the visual arts, the performing arts, opera, that side of it. But also the ghosty stuff. Now, obviously, the ghost stuff, you can't write about every day. There's only a limited sort of window for it. But certainly every Halloween, any opportunity I had, I was out there writing about spooky things, whether it was, the top 10 lists that newspapers love, the top 10 most haunted places in Wales, those kind of things. But also looking for new places other people hadn't written about. And they are the places which really inspired some of my books that came later. So it is thanks to the journalism that was the springboard then into all the ghost books I'd write later on.
Fantastic. So you went from that, you took a big sort of leap of faith, jumped into the world of books, wrote your first couple of books, then got into the sort of the Welsh sort of the Victorian archive stuff, the ghost stories. And this new book, Paranormal Wales, is a lovely mix of eerie locations and strange happenings. Is there one place in particular that made you sit up and think that there may indeed be something going on here? One place that perhaps affected you that's featured in the book?
My sort of answer to that one, and luckily it does feature in the book as well, but there isn't a single place or a single event that has made me think, yes, this is paranormal. But I've been in lots of places where there has been things that you can't explain. And I think the one place where so much has happened is Nos Castle in the Swansea Valley, which I'm sure you're very familiar with.
I know it well.
The former home of Adelina Patti, who was this operatic superstar, the first diva in the late Victorian age. And she settled in Wales because, well, she wanted to get away from all the prying eyes. She was there with a second husband and things. And she is now thought to be one of the many ghosts there. And of all the experiences, there's been two in particular, both of which happened in the same part of Craigenors. Adelina was so rich. She actually built her own opera house, her own little personal theatre in Craigenors. It's now a listed building there. And one of the novel features she built into it was a slanting floor. And this floor meant she could put the sort of orchestra and players underneath the stage to cram people in. And she'd be up there singing, and all the musicians would be out of sight underneath this slanted floor. Now, underneath that floor, on one occasion, I was there with a friend, and we were filming a documentary which had nothing to do with ghosts whatsoever. We were just there. It was about opera. It was about Adelina, not ghosts. And we had these big lights trained on us to be illuminated for the cameras. And joking, I said to him, look, you do realize this is where the ghosts are. And as I said that, the light bulbs that were on us exploded. And he made the cameraman delete the footage, but my colleague who I was filming this with jumped out of his skin after that happened. And it was perfect timing. You know, I said about the ghosts, these things exploded. And in the end, we had to move out of there. We couldn't get the lights to work down there. But I wasn't joking, because the other incident which happened in Craigenors, which did make me really think, and it's one of the most, I have a lot of difficulty explaining this because it's such a ridiculous ghostly experience. But we were there it was a bit of an organized ghost night. And I'm always a little bit skeptical about these things because, you know, people if they pay money, they expect things to happen. And, you know, and things did happen. But at one point, we were doing what they called scrying, which is where you look into a mirror. And the idea is a ghost or something might put their face onto somebody else's face, and you see someone else's face on your face in the mirror. And me and my friend were watching a girl we were with sitting there looking in the mirror. And as we were watching her face in the mirror from behind, she grew a beard and a mustache on her face. And she definitely did not have a beard and mustache beforehand. And as we were standing there watching it, this big bushy beard grew. And she saw it herself. She freaked and jumped up and turned around, and it was gone. Now, it was set up in a dramatic way, and there were candles and things. So maybe the candles and the lighting and all this stuff could have done that. But we tried to recreate it quickly, and we couldn't. And it sounds insane, but the spookiest thing I think I've ever seen was in Craigenors, where a lady who was with us grew a beard.
That's amazing. There's a really nice bit about Craigenors in the book, actually, which sort of piqued my interest. And another one that jumped out at me is the piece that you wrote about the Prince of Wales pub in Kenfig, which I know is somewhere that you've spent a bit of time as well. It's drawn a lot of attention over the years, and a lot of people have claimed to have some real unusual experiences there. It's been featured in the news, it's featured in your book, it's featured in a lot of other publications and sort of haunted magazines and things like that. What's your take on all that about the recordings and the voices and the walls and etc.? Anything?
Well, the Prince of... I'm glad you mentioned the Prince of Wales, because I think that is the one I'm most proud of in that book, because if you look at all the other readily available ghost books out there on the you know, if you go into a bookshop and look at the books there about Welsh ghosts, even Peter Underwood, who I look up as the god of writing about Welsh ghost books, nobody else has written about it in a book. And like you mentioned, in the early 80s, there were TV cameras, there were people from America flying over to come to the Prince of Wales in Kenfig to investigate these strange voices. And then all of a sudden, everyone just forgot about it. And I assumed that meant maybe the activity had died down, maybe it had gone away. And in my role as a journalist, I popped along to write an article for Wales Online, and it's still out there. If you do a search for Wales Online, Prince of Wales, Kenfig, you'll find this article that I wrote a few years ago. And I popped my head in just to see what had happened to all these ghost stories, and it turns out they hadn't gone away. If anything, they'd escalated. But people had just stopped looking. They'd stopped asking. And because they don't advertise it, because a lot of pubs like to use ghosts in a commercial way. You know, there'll be big banners outside saying, "We are the most haunted pub, come in and spend money." And they don't do any of that. So people had forgotten this place was haunted. And so it was only by taking the initiative and actually going there myself and doing some investigating that I discovered not only is it still haunted, it's even more haunted than before. And to answer your question about what do I think is going on, well, I'm not a big fan of what they call the stone tape theory, which I guess, are you familiar with the stone tape theory?
Yeah, yes, I am, yeah. But yeah. The sort of recordings in the walls, really, isn't it?
Yes. And it's derived from what was a work of fiction, which in itself should be a warning sign. But if we assume this can work, the idea is that the stones in this building are so old, and it is an incredibly old building, I'll give it that. And the idea is that these stones, almost like a primitive video recorder, have recorded sounds and maybe images from over the years, and they are playing them back. And people are they're hearing sounds which were first made hundreds of years ago, whenever it was. So that's the theory. I'm not a big fan of the stone tape theory, but if we take what people say as being true, that the rooms are locked, there is nobody inside, and there is the sound of an organ being played, well, I can't explain what is doing it. So in a roundabout way, to answer your question, I have no idea what's going on there. But a lot of people seem to think there is something, and I certainly can't disprove what these people are saying. And to make it even eerier, some of the newer ghosts which I found out about are actually a bit more interactive than the stone tape ghosts from the 1980s. Nowadays, there's even some ghosts who are said to be throwing objects at members of bar staff and things. So that does sound like it's escalating. And one little thing I did love when I was there, and sadly he's retired now, but Gareth, who was the landlord at the time, just a couple of years ago, he developed a friendly relationship with these ghosts. And he said to me, he doesn't call them ghosts, he calls them his friends. And each night before going to bed, he says good night to the ghosts, to his friends in the building, and keeps them on side and keeps them happy. And that seems to be working. They seem to be, on good terms and not causing any trouble. So maybe there is something to be learned there. Maybe if you are nice and respectful to any potential ghosts, you can avoid any of the shenanigans that we see on these kind of Blair Witch type TV shows.
That's amazing. Well, there's a lovely piece in the book all about the Prince of Wales, with some fantastic photographs as well. It really is an atmospheric place, and I really enjoyed reading about that. Also, one that I did enjoy, and one that's quite close to my heart, is that you mentioned the White Lady of Oystermouth Castle, and she features strongly with a number of accounts mentioned in the book. And she's probably just one of a number of white ladies that we see, especially in Wales. I mean, I know the Margam Castle one as well, and the Oystermouth Castle one. There's a number of these. Why do you think that this sort of ghost keeps popping up in Wales, and why do you think a lot of people are seeing these white ladies? Do you think it's a cultural thing, or is it something unique to Wales, do you think?
I think it is a cultural thing, yes, in one respect, because it's almost a cliche, isn't it? If you look at a lot of the old sort of gothic romantic tales of knights in shining armor, and because these kind of ghosts, these white ladies and black ladies and green ladies, and there is a green lady in Caerphilly, but these kind of ladies are usually connected with castles and historical places. And the stories connected with them about these chivalrous knights, it's usually the brave man who is the hero, and it's usually the woman who pays the ultimate price and gets tragically killed so the hero can weep over their loss, and then they come back to haunt them. And, that could just be it. It could just be somebody saw something weird. There's this old romantic story connected to the building where a woman died, so it must have been that woman. And it kind of reminds me in a way of opera. And there aren't many connections between ghosts and opera. But there's this joke with opera where if you can't be bothered to sit until the end, it doesn't matter because they all end in the same way. She dies at the end. And it's a bit the same with these old ghost stories where she dies at the end. The knight survives, she dies at the end, and then comes back to haunt as a white lady. And that's probably one of the best theories I've got for it, really. What do you think, Owen? Why do you think there are so many?
I don't know. I've got to be honest. I mean, I was just this morning recording a story about the White Lady of Oystermouth, and there's some lovely sort of sightings over the years, and some featured in your book as well. And I just think a white lady is close to what you see as a stereotypical ghost, isn't it? Maybe if you see that shadow, that white glare, if you like, you can associate with a white lady. And as you say, it's such a stereotypical thing over the years, but there are, a number of some of the most credible sightings that have been seen locally, especially in Oystermouth, mentioned by yourself, and the Margam Castle one in particular, are actually of these white ladies. And I just wondered if there was anything in particular that drew them to this area, and whether it was a particularly a Welsh thing, or whether all over the UK, all over the world, these white ladies were seen. Maybe something for a future story.
Well, certainly all over the UK. And like you were saying, saying a white lady, it's so vague. You're not saying if it's a tall or a short lady, or what is she wearing? It could just be a white blob. But then, it's part of the culture now, isn't it? You're like, oh yes, it must be the white lady, when it could just be, some smoke. But there you go.
Yeah, it could be. And you say there's not much connection between opera and ghosts, except, of course, in Craigenose, where there's loads of connection.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm going on back to the book anyway. Some fantastic photographs in this, Mark. I'm really, really impressed with some of the photos you've managed to take, and also some of your friends as well. And it really makes the book pop and come alive. Are we going to see more of this in sort of future books, where you're going to feature a lot of photography? And have you taken any photos and found anything weird in them when you looked at the back as well?
Well, photography isn't one of my strong points, but going back to what I was saying about being a journalist, certainly being a journalist now, what they call multimedia journalists, and it's a sad state of affairs, but with cutbacks and things and people doing multiple jobs, journalists are expected to take their own photos when they're out and about, whereas in the old days, you would take a professional photographer with you. And so you have to learn some basics just to do your job in a way in that respect. As to the photos in the book, all of the good ones were taken by other people. I've only included photos by me when I had no choice. So if the professionals hadn't taken them, they had to be mine. And I like to think it's nice to get a balance between photography and words, because one of the things I'm quite passionate about with this book, and another one I've got coming up, but I think, and this is something you do as well, Owen, rather than just tell somebody a story about some ghost in some castle in some place, I think if you can tell people this ghost was called George, let's say, and it's in this particular castle, and you can visit this castle, and this is what it looks like, I think that's much more, it re-enchants the world a little bit by putting these ghosts back out there in places that people can jump in their car and go and visit, and they'll see it and they'll go, that's the place in the book, that's the place where the ghost is. And it's just a little thing, like I said, I use the word re-enchanting, but it's a little way to put some magic back into the world, I think.
Oh, very much so. And that's something you do as well. And there's a lot of that in this book. And also a lot of inspiration for people to go and to go to these locations and perhaps do a little more digging as well, which is something that's really nice. And also a lot of it is very, very local. So there are places that you can visit with the book, and it gives you a good sort of stepping stone to sort of explore these places a lot deeper. And you touched on stories there, and your podcast is full of stories. We've had a load of these over the last couple of months that the podcast has been running, and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. And as a storyteller, I always love a good story, and adding a little bit of spice to the story. And if you've got names and characters involved, it makes it all the better as well. Is there one particular story that sticks in your mind as regards to ghosts? Do you have a favourite ghost story?
Yes, I do. And it's one that I've told a million times. And the good thing about doing this on my podcast is I can just refer people back to the other episode because I've already recorded it. And I think my favorite ghost story ever is a story that I call the real life Scooby-Doo story. And the reason it's called that is because it does actually have a dog in it which hunts down ghosts. And that was on episode 6. So that's a nice way for me not to have to repeat myself. It's on episode 6 if anyone would like to listen to that. Another favourite, which again I've already recorded, is the first episode. That's the two-headed phantom of Abersychan. And the reason I love that one so much is partly because a two-headed ghost is so unique. I mean, I don't know of any other two-headed ghosts in Wales. So in that respect, this is a one-off ghost. But the reason it has two heads is such a grisly explanation. It's not just some ghost who popped up with two heads. it gained two heads following a grisly experience. So I'm being slightly cryptic, I guess, but my favorite two ghost stories would be the Scooby-Doo one from episode 6 and the two-headed phantom from episode 1.
Brilliant. I like the Scooby-Doo one in particular. I always enjoy that when you tell it at the Ghost of Wales events and things. It's always a nice one.
You probably heard that 100 times, Owen.
You probably not as much as my stories, I know that, but yeah, it's one that I have heard a few times, but I always enjoy it. I think it's safe to say, Mark, that you're getting known now about the UK, about your excellent sort of work in paranormal and ghosts and curious happenings and things like that. And it's really nice to see that more people are getting interested. The podcast is going from strength to strength. Paranormal Wales is now available as well. And what can we expect next?
You're right that the podcast is doing. It's really surprised me how well the podcast is doing. And so that's all down to the people listening right now. So thank you very, very much for that, because I remember when I started and I had no idea what was good figures, what was bad figures. I just recorded this thing, put it out there and hoped for the best. And I checked the numbers against this website that said, if you're getting this many listeners, you're in the top 20% in the world or something. And I thought that can't be right. Who the hell's listening to this thing? But the podcast is doing very well. So that is right at the top of my list of things to really, really work on. And that's going to keep going every week until I keel over, I guess. I'm going to keep doing that one. I've got my next book, which is finally coming out in June 2021. It's been massively delayed because of the whole situation in the world right now. It was supposed to be it still is a companion piece to Paranormal Wales, and I was hoping they'd be released quite close together. As it turns out, there's been a big gap of about a year, but in a way that might be a good thing, because who wants to release two books that close together anyway? So my next book, called Illustrated Tales of Wales, will be out in June, fingers crossed. And otherwise, I think that's quite enough to keep me quiet for the moment, really. So I'm just going to podcast, more books, and everything else.
That's brilliant, Mark, and I really look forward to that one. I thoroughly enjoyed Paranormal Wales, and I'd recommend it to anyone really with an interest in this sort of thing. There's some stuff that a lot of people would know about. There's some stuff that's a little bit obscure, and there are a load of places that I really want to visit, having read this, some of the stories you have here, and some of the tales which you feature. Very atmospheric, a very, very a standout piece. And where can we get it, Mark? Where can we get this book?
It's available in all good bookshops, the usual thing, all good bookshops. It's available in all the good online places. I won't name drop them, but all the big online places. And if anyone would like a signed copy, signed copies are available from the comic shop in Swansea. Now, I'll spell that because it's not comics and shop. It's comics with an X, COMIX, and shop as in ye olde shoppy, so shoppy, SHOPPE. But if you do a search for comics shoppy, spelt that way, in Swansea, they can sort out a signed copy for you if anybody wants a signed copy, either sent to them or ideally pop in if you are anywhere near Swansea.
Oh, that's brilliant, Mark. That's great. Hey, thank you very much for talking to us about Paranormal Wales. And,
thank you, Owen. I need to reclaim my podcast now, I guess, don't I? And take it back.
Oh, but that was great, and I really look forward to seeing the illustrated tales from Wales as well. That really sort of piqued my interest. So yeah, I look forward to that as well.
Thank you. And before you disappear, Owen, I should ask, because this is the Halloween episode as well. What are your plans for Halloween this year?
Well, who knows? If I can leave my house, my plans will be extensive. But if I can't, it'll be very much a haunting for myself, I think. I'll glare at the window and speak in a spooky way and shout some tales into the night, I think. But
something for the neighbours to look forward to.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But what with the world the way it is at the moment, Halloween, I'll just have to see what comes from it. But always one of my favourite times of the year, and one which you can really make kind of special, I think. And hopefully everyone who's listening to this is really enjoying it as well. So happy Halloween all.
Thank you very much, Owen. Happy Halloween. And of course, before I let you go off and enjoy Halloween, Owen, where can we check out your current videos? Because I know there are some new ghost stories and things out there. How can we track you down?
Absolutely. Well, as you know, Mark, getting out there and performing has been quite difficult the last few months. So what I've tried to do is put on some of my stories onto YouTube. Very simply told, it's just me in a chair telling tales. But if anyone wants to check them out, they are Time Between Times Storytelling, or just type in Owen Staten in YouTube. And every week I put out a new video all about Welsh folklore, ghost stories, historical things, and I'd invite any sort of feedback. And anyone who'd like to follow me on Twitter, that would be absolutely fantastic. It's Owen. If you type in Owen Staten, that's fine. But my actual Twitter handle is Owen S. Griffiths. But yeah, please get in touch there. And if you've got anything you'd like to see me cover in the future, that would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Happy Halloween to you.
And happy Halloween. Thank you very much, Owen. I hope you found that little chat interesting. And I promise that is my one and only bit of shameless self-promotion this year. Well, maybe until my next book comes out in June or July. But until then, I promise I will focus on other people and I will not talk about myself. But I hope you enjoyed that look at some of Wales's most haunted places, and it's always wonderful to catch up with Owen, who I think is going to be back on this podcast sooner than you might expect. Tune in next week. But Owen isn't the only friend joining me on this episode. Coming up next is not one, but two special guests. Two special guests, Sarah and Leanne, from the ghost hunting group Cymru Paranormal. Now, I've got an entire episode dedicated to Cymru Paranormal coming up in November, and I will tell you all about them and look into what they do in more detail then. But for now, let us just say that I've been friendly with Cymru Paranormal for a few years. We met at a convention a few years ago in Bath University. I was there to give a talk about Victorian ghosts. They were there because they are fully trained members of ASAP, which is a good thing. Again, we'll talk about that more next month, but it is a good thing to have fully trained ghost hunters, not just... You don't want people who've watched one too many episodes of a TV show and then they just start going out, wandering around people's houses looking for ghosts. You want people who are a little bit more ethical and a little bit more trained in what they do, and that is exactly what Sarah and Leanne and the rest of Cymru Paranormal are. And what I would like to know on this podcast, because they would usually talk at my live events, and for this podcast, I would like to catch up with them and talk about Halloween, because Halloween is seen as a time for people to go out looking for ghosts. And what I want to know is that, is Halloween any better than the rest of the year? Or do people just do it because, you know, it's the traditional thing to do? It's Halloween, it's spooky, watch some horror movies, carve some jack-o'-lanterns, go on a ghost hunt. Well, to find out via the magic of the internet once more, I am now going to dial in and talk to, fingers crossed, Sarah and Leanne. Is there anybody there?
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very well.
Yeah,
It's not the same talking to you guys online for this book launch. It'd be much nicer if we were in the same room, but there you go. What can you do?
Absolutely. But, you know, we adapt, don't we? So it's Sarah here speaking from Cymru Paranormal for everybody listening.
Of course, I should have explained. Do you want to say hello as well, Leanne, so we can...
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi, Mark.
And that's Leanne. So if people can memorize those voices, they'll know exactly who's speaking now. And so obviously we're not meeting up this year, but what are you guys doing for Halloween, if anything?
Well, we were planning on hopefully getting together. Obviously, it's ever-changing, so we've sort of shelved any plans at the moment with everything that's going on, and we're just going to take things as they come. We'll probably hook up, do something online together. So, you know, we're just going to take it every day, really, Mark.
Yes, yeah, just make it up on the night and see what happens.
Absolutely. You know, we're in an ever-changing situation, so it's what it is. You know, we're all keeping in touch anyway, and, you know, we'll continue to do that virtually and see what happens.
Yeah. So if this wasn't happening this year, if this was a normal year, if this was 2019 again, say, people do think Halloween is a good time to go out looking for ghosts. That's when it's in the press and it's all over the newspapers and websites, Halloween and ghosts. Is that purely the press, or do you think it is actually a good time to go out looking for things?
Well, I tend to think, yes, there's a lot of folklore and everything behind Halloween, but I think it's quite a nice time of year for everybody to get together and to investigate somewhere, maybe go somewhere a little bit special. And it just adds that little bit of air to it. And, I think it's quite an important date in the calendar, a celebration, whatever your feelings are. But, I think it's quite nice. We've met as a group for a number of years around Halloween. Leanne will talk about a couple of those. We've had a great night. We've always done it sort of, taken nice Halloween sort of food along, your ghosts and your ghoulies, little biscuits and stuff like that. So just adds a little bit. So I would encourage anybody to go at Halloween, just really because it is Halloween. So whatever better time of the year to investigate ghosts and the paranormal than the night where they say that the two worlds join.
So it doesn't really matter if you find ghosts, because you're guaranteed to have nice ghouly biscuits at least. So that makes it worthwhile, doesn't it, to get together?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, you've touched on a good point there. It doesn't really matter if you don't, potentially experience anything at all. If you personally experience, that's an absolute bonus. But, sometimes when you'll go into a lot of these buildings, it's the overall atmosphere. It's actually taking in the appreciation of the history of the place, the building, what would have been happening, etc. So, you encompass all of that in when you're going out investigating. And even if you've had a quiet evening and there hasn't been anything extraordinary that's happened, you still come away with a lovely feeling about the place, a nice buzz. So, just always stay open-minded, I say, but it's about managing people's expectations.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I think. I'm not a professional like you guys, but when I go on these investigations, it's just cool being in an old castle for the night or somewhere, isn't it? It's just being out and about.
Yeah. And, and as a group of people, we've been to some absolutely, stunning locations. And we've been invited to some equally stunning locations. And, when you're sat somewhere and, you've got walls that are 500 years old, and you start thinking about everything that's happened and gone on within those four walls, that's quite mind-blowing, really. If you start looking at that, I just think it's fantastic. And we're so fortunate in the UK that we've got so many wonderful buildings and so many, and that can be outside as well. We're not even just talking about inside. We've got lots of places outside that are equally of interest in the UK. And so I think, we're very fortunate.
Do you think there's anywhere, and I appreciate this is going to be a heck of a question under the circumstances, but if people, maybe they were thinking of joining a ghost hunt or something for Halloween, and they can't do that now, could they pop to the local haunted pub or something and do something themselves? Or would you not recommend people go out and just do things spur of the moment?
Well, I'll leave Leanne to answer that question, because, we're sort of quite open to that, wherever you are. So I'll pass that one to Leanne.
Oh yeah, Leanne, you've been given my tricky question.
I think there's plenty of scope for investigating almost anywhere, really. Sarah's been talking about these beautiful buildings that we're very lucky to have been in, investigated. And they've got a lot of history behind them. They're hundreds and hundreds of years old. So there's so many things have happened there previous. But there's even just outdoor places. It doesn't have to be a building. It could be a local pub. Whether you can get in there after 10 o'clock, I don't know.
Yeah, an early hunt. Yeah.
But yeah, we've done outdoor investigations in forests and near various different monuments and places like that. So by all means, feel free to go out and investigate, as long as you're keeping safe and, you can see where you are and what you're doing.
I quite like that. So in a way, it's get outdoors, isn't it? And that's probably going to be the cheapest one you can do. It's not going to cost you anything, is it, to go to these places after dark? And as long as you take an umbrella, and you should be okay.
Yeah, that's it. And as long as you've got a torch, you know where you're going.
Yes.
No reason why not. We've done it many times, sometimes a little bit ad hoc. We've got an evening free. Do you fancy popping out somewhere? And we've gone out several times and investigated. Even just a small group, which is quite handy for us at the moment. So we've gone out as a group of 4, a group of 6. We've gone out as a group of 10 or 15 sometimes as well. It just depends on numbers.
And do you find that, not that evidence and things is the be-all and end-all of it, but do you find they're just as successful, if that's the right word, as, going to some established mansion or something, say? Yeah,
they can be, definitely. We've got a few sort of favourites that we nip to every now and again. But yeah, there's been obviously some unusual experiences we've had in these places. But as Sarah said before, sometimes it's just being out there with people and, just the atmosphere of it all, really, that makes it.
Yeah, again, I said it earlier, that's what I love about them, is being out there with like-minded people and just, you have a good time at the same time, don't you, as well as the ghosts are a bonus, if they turn up. But
absolutely, and what I would say is that if anybody were looking to do anything outside over Halloween, there are some fantastic places that you can go. There's the old historical burial chambers that are about, etc. All we would say is that if you're outside, always respect where you are. Always respect that there may be people's houses close by. Don't venture onto private land. So if it says, this is private property, please don't enter. Just really consider where you're going. But there's so many places. There's old ruined castles about, and you can just take that in. And what better time? Halloween tends to be, historically, from my memory, certainly over the last few years, tends to be quite a dry evening. So what better than to be outside when it's dark? You've got a group of people, you've got some torches, you've got your eyes and your ears, that's all you need. And just, see what happens, see what experiences you feel. It's see what personal experiences you feel. It's not always about, going out and controlling everything, because obviously when we do strict investigations, we're control. If you're doing something like that, you can't really control what's going on. You can't control if there's going to be a car driving past somewhere, etc. But just enjoy it. But always respect your surroundings and the people who could be around there.
You do realise you've jinxed us now, and it's going to hammer down on Halloween. And I'll be phoning you up on October the 31st with Sarah. I was going to go to the forest looking for ghosts tonight, but it's soaking.
It's not Sarah's fault.
Yes. Just quickly on that. Just from a practical point of view, I guess you don't get the police turning up or anything if people might see some people they don't recognise walking around in the woods. Does that ever happen, or is it pretty safe?
Well, obviously it can happen. If you're somewhere out and you're in the country, but actually there could be a house around and they hear and see a group of people, the police might drive by. But ordinarily, it wouldn't, unless you were up to no good. And then, you can expect the police to drive by and sort of pick you up then, can't you? But overall, you're quite safe. But like I say, it's about respect, isn't it? It's about everywhere you go. It's about respecting what is there, and don't go, getting drunk and causing any damage, etc. Just be sensible and just enjoy and relax, take it all in.
And that should apply to any investigation, shouldn't it? Don't get drunk, be sensible. Yes. Get as drunk as you want afterwards, but during it, be sensible. And yes.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier, and I think I'm going to have to pick on Leanne again for this one. See, Leanne is there for the tough questions. But yeah, you did say about Halloween events in days gone by, and Leanne has got sort of the best examples of your or your parties? Is that fair to call them parties, or your best Halloween investigations?
Yeah, we've had I'm not sure if we call them parties as such, but
Get-togethers.
we can get into trouble for stuff like that. But no, we've been to so many different locations, and we try to make a point of obviously Halloween being the important one. With the seasons change and everything, it is always a special time of the year. So a few times we've actually had whole weekends away. So we might have sort of more of a relaxed first night where we have food and we get together and things like that. But then the following day would always be the more serious investigation side of things that we would do. In fact, one that we went to last year, Mark, I believe you came with us as well, in Newton House.
I remember Newton House, yes, a fine choice.
Yeah, so that was a lovely location because we were able to hire it for the weekend. So we had plenty of time to get used to the place. So we had some really wonderful access there, and we spent a long time in all parts of the building. So that was pretty special. And in the past we've done other weekends. We've been to North Wales and had a whole weekend up there investigating Beaumaris. We've trying to think of the other ones we've done. We've done Margam Castle, which again I think you came with us to one of those as well, Mark.
I'm like a bad penny. I keep turning up at all of these things. Yes.
No, we love it when you come with us, Mark. It adds to the evening.
A novice to pick on. Yes.
I think we did Tritower Court and Castle as well for another one. So that was another one. That was a bit of a spooky one because it was all foggy and it was a bit of a misty night, that one. So that added to the atmosphere quite a bit as well.
St. Breville's.
Yes, St. Breville's, many a weekend in St. Breville's.
Yeah.
We've had some weird sort of correlations as well, where we've had 13 guests, and we've gone there on Friday the 13th, which is probably the closest to Halloween we've managed to get. So rather than get Halloween, we've got Friday the 13th in October.
Still creepy.
Yeah, exactly. So we go with the hype there and see if it brings any differences there. But we've had so many different investigations, so we're missing out this year, unfortunately.
Well, next year we'll just have to. Well, you guys, and if I tag along, we'll just have the biggest party ever, I guess, to make up for it. So
yeah, you're always welcome to come with us as well, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Weirdly, you've reminded me, you mentioned Newton Hall there. And normally when we do these events, we have the spooky belly dancers with us, who I'm sure you know, the Lotus Sisters.
Yeah.
Did you know Ronnie from the Lotus Sisters was the tour guide at Newton Hall? And after we did that event there, after we spent the night there, I went back, bumped into Ronnie, and she showed me some of the spookier places there. And she showed me a mummified cat which is buried underneath the floor, which if I'd known that at the time of the investigation, would have been a great place to go and look around. But there you go, hindsight. I know now. I know the next time, or if anyone goes to Newton Hall, there is a mummified cat buried underneath one of the floorboards.
Wow.
But and on that note, because I know I'll be getting you guys back on very soon in a couple of weeks to talk about all that you do and to give people a lot more information about how Cymru Paranormal investigate. But in the meantime, if anyone listening to this fancied getting in touch with you or getting involved in some way, how's the best way for people to do that?
So we've got our website, www.cymruparanormal.com. We've got our Facebook page, Cymru Paranormal, our Twitter account, Cymru Paranormal, Instagram, Cymru Paranormal, or drop us an email, inquiries@cymruparanormal.com. So most of the info, to be honest, if you want to contact us and get a formal response, is email.
There's a pattern here, isn't there? As long as people go looking for Cymru Paranormal, they'll find you on pretty much anything. And, just quickly, is there anything else you'd like to say about Halloween before we catch up again? Or is that all your Halloween adventures?
Wow, we could talk forever about Halloween and Halloween adventures, but...
we'd have nothing to talk about next time, then.
No, exactly. But yeah, just all really enjoy it, It's a great evening, whatever you're doing, whether you're just in the house, whether you're out, just enjoy it, make the most of the evening. It only happens once a year, so make the most
of it.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you very much, both, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Happy Halloween.
And you. Thanks, Mark.
And thank you very much, Cymru Paranormal. And while this year is an unusual year, I hope that has inspired you in some way to maybe get a little bit creative with your Halloween parties or whatever you get up to this year, because in a way it proves that you don't need lots of money, you don't need fancy costumes, you don't need loads of friends and loads of alcohol. Well, maybe the alcohol, but no, I'm joking. But you don't need all of that to enjoy yourself on October the 31st. Maybe you know of just the perfect spot you and some friends can go and investigate and just scare yourself silly a bit before going home, watching some spooky films, carving some pumpkins, and maybe reading a few pages of Paranormal Wales. Okay, that really is my last bit of shameless self-promotion. But what I'd like to do to wrap up this fifth and final Halloween episode, because as regular listeners will know, I have dedicated the entire month of October to Halloween. That's 5 episodes. This is the 5th one. The other 4 are still out there if you would like to go back and listen to them. They tell the history of Halloween. They look at the folklore of Nos Calan Gaeaf, the Welsh Halloween. They look at Jack-o'-lantern, the curious Welsh jack-o'-lantern, which, well, it does some nasty things in the forests at night. So if you wanted to go and check those out, they are all there. And of course, that is something else, another alternative you could do on October the 31st. If you are totally out of ideas, why not sit there and listen to my Halloween specials? And that brings me to the point in the episode where I like to ask what you think about all this. It's always great to hear from people. I'd love to know what you are doing this Halloween, or what you did, depending on when you are listening to this. So track me down. It's quite easy to do. You can track me down via my website or on social media. Just do a search for Mark Rees. Put the word ghosts or Wales or folklore in, and I will pop up on top, and we can have a chat online all about this. And coming up next week, with Halloween done and dusted, sadly, for another year, we are going to look at some of the curious traditions surrounding Guy Fawkes Night on November the 5th. And that episode will be released on November the 5th. How appropriate. And to make sure you don't miss that, as usual, please consider hitting the subscribe button and you will never miss an episode ever. Now, to wrap up the final part of the final Halloween episode. I've mentioned many a time on these Halloween episodes how much I love the classic old American books about the holiday, and not just the historical ones. Any of these cool American books about Halloween are great. I devour them. But there is one absolute classic I think we have not touched upon yet, and really it would be unfair to do 5 episodes all about Halloween and not mention the late, great Ray Bradbury. Now, some people will be nodding their heads in agreement about now. Those who are not probably have not read the book. But that book is The Halloween Tree, which for many people growing up is the definitive work of fiction about Halloween. And it has some lovely little verses in it, some little bits of poetry, which I think sound great even when lifted from the context of the book. And that is what I would like to do to wrap up this epic 5-week-long Halloween countdown by reading to you some of those evocative words used by Ray Bradbury in The Halloween Tree. So before I leave you, it just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening to all of these Halloween episodes. I hope you've enjoyed them as much as I've enjoyed recording them, and thank you to all of my guests along the way. I've been Mark Rees. This has been my Ghosts and Folklore podcast, the Halloween specials beaming to you from Wales to the world. It's the best, it's the beautiful, it's the only Ghosts and Folklore podcast. And it just leaves me to say, have a very happy Halloween, a Nos Calan Gaeaf hapus. And after clearing my throat, always clear your throat before poetry, I will read you this verse and leave you to go on your merry way in search of ghosts and ghouls and whatever is lurking on the crossroad tonight. And whatever you do, beware the hook, the gutter. To quote Ray Bradbury, the leaves have burned to gold and red. The grass is brown, the old year dead. But hang the harvest high, oh see, the candle constellations on the Halloween tree. The stars, they turn, the candles burn, and the mouse leaves scurry on the cold wind borne, and a mob of smiles shine down on thee from the gourds hung high on the Halloween tree. The smile of the witch and the smile of the cat, the smile of the beast and the smile of the bat, the smile of the reaper taking his fee, all cut and glimmer on the Halloween tree. Until next time, no star, and listen carefully for that very special Halloween sound effect.